Good evening. I would like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next Board of Education meeting is on Wednesday, March 12th at 7:30 p.m. in the Board of Education meeting room. In lieu of any other remarks this evening, I would like to recognize the life of Kevin Newman, who is a former member of the Darien Board of Education. He died January 29th, 2025. I'd like to thank Clara Sartori for organizing everybody to get some remarks, and Dennis Maroney, who isn't here this evening, but who put all of the disparate remarks together into something that I'll read now to honor Kevin. Kevin served on the board during the turn of the century in which education changed dramatically. There were unheard of names and phrases such as internet, email, and digital data storage, all of which permanently and profoundly changed concepts of knowledge and learning. Kevin was a Vietnam War veteran who worked in finance for his career, and he used that acumen to assist Darien for years, serving on the big three boards, the Board of Education, Board of Finance, and Board of Selectmen. Kevin, as a member of the Board of Ed, was steadfast in his support of Darien students and strove to make sure that education was provided in a steadfast and fiscally responsible manner. Kevin served as vice chair, finance committee chair, and also served on the high school building committee. So thank you for that, Kevin. Kevin was also responsible for taking the first steps towards making girls ice hockey a team sport. He proposed the first budget that included $5,000 for the group, and the next year they became a team, which Dave personally has populated. Kevin Newman was a man of wonder, wit, and wisdom. When sharing news with him, his eyes reflected a sincere interest and sense of wonder. His quick wit and superior use of the English language left people searching for words in response. Drawing upon his intellect and wisdom, he held roomfuls of people in the palm of his hand. He was outspoken in his drive for excellence among his board colleagues and the administration. He apparently had zero tolerance for sloppy presentations or inaccurate financial reports. We offer condolences to Kevin's wife, Janie, his son-in-law, 2 daughters and daughter-in-law, as well as 4 grandchildren. Kevin was a uniquely talented individual whose dedication and Blue Wave pride and spirit will be valued by generations. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor Kevin. Thank you all. Switching gears a little bit, just one item of business. We have in our calendar April 3rd as the date on which the Board of Finance will vote on their budget, but it's an error. They actually are planning to vote on April 8th, which is also, we also have a meeting currently scheduled for that night. I've been in, thank you to the CDSP who uncovered it, but I have had a couple of conversations with the Board of Finance chair. They are planning to vote on the 8th. They leave themselves a little room. They statutorily have to submit the budget on the 15th. They could go as late as the 10th. I will be in regular contact with Jim if we need to move our meeting back a night to the 9th so that we can attend the Board of Finance vote. We can do that. We don't need to make any decisions this evening, but I just wanted to alert you all to the fact that there is a conflict on the night of the 8th. Okay, and we can figure out specifics going forward. Right, with that, I'll turn it to you, Alan.
Public comment.
Public comment. Thank you, Sarah.
Good evening. If anybody in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay. Superintendent's report, Alan.
Thank you. I'll be brief. Yesterday we had our professional learning day, and there was a variety of topics that were all building base, either from examples included AP exams and a digital platform, the performance-based assessment, the MTSS, restorative practices, NGSS assessment review, and a variety of other topics at the elementary, middle and high schools. Congratulations to Maria Kolmachik, who represented Darien High School in the science research program at the Junior Science and Humanities Symposium at UConn. I read a wee bit of the descriptor, and honestly, it just blew my mind. I'll just say it was about cell research, and it was just I honestly couldn't understand it. You know. It just was just amazing, representative of work that they do. We had 13 students who traveled to Greece over the break, and believe that they have a lot of experiences and memories made during that time. In the lieu of the annual walkathon, the homeschool participated in a read around the world because obviously they couldn't walk around the school this particular year. We will be celebrating Read Across America Day on March 3rd. The quiz bowl continued at the middle school to impress at the 6th grade level, 7th grade and 8th grade. They were down in New Jersey, and they placed silver, gold and bronze. And those different grade level groups, individual kids had individual honors along the way. The state legislature, as you may have heard, it looks like it's going to go through that $40 million addition to ECR for this year, right? So it looks like they're going to put $40 million in that. It was short, I think, about $136 million. If our percentage would put us over the, I think it's about 72% or so. Maybe Rich will talk a wee bit later about that, but it would cover the deficit for this year. Whereas nothing, it doesn't impact the following year, but should we get that, the chunk of that is projected to cover the deficit that we had. Due to unseen circumstances, you know, we have the superintendent community conversation coming up on Thursday evening. Our facilitator has taken ill. So we're going to try and schedule that for March 10th, Monday, March 10th. Just still, there's not much we can do about it from the ADL. So I intend that's just late breaking news, and I intend to share that first thing in the morning with our community members. And I had a wee opportunity to sit and watch a wee bit of the practice after school today for Les Mis, and I would encourage you to get your tickets early for that particular showing. And Madam Chair has spoken about the April 8th board meeting versus the budget discussion at the Board of Finance.
Thank you. Student representative reports, Brenna and Ryan.
Good evening. We had a very successful first day back from our February recess, and we want to reiterate that now is the time to get tickets to Les Mis. Production opens in about 2 weeks or so. And we will also have our DHS Jazz Jamboree this Friday at 3 p.m. Wish everyone the best of luck and best performances.
Yeah, I think Brenna covered it all. Hope our students enjoyed their extended break, especially with that new Monday being off, and wish the best coming to the rest of the year.
Thank you very much. Approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the regular meeting held on February 11th, 2025. Sarah?
Just one change. Thank you to Joanna's Eagle Eyes. Her motion for the minutes to add back the Canvas monitor. It said decrease. It should say increase. So I will change the minutes and send it back over.
Okay, so may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on February 11th as amended? Robin, seconded by Joanna. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Board committee reports. Anybody have anything? John?
2 Thursdays ago, we had a finance committee meeting. We talked a bit about the deficit that Ellen has now highlighted might be, it was diminishing now, might be gone away for this current fiscal year. There's no transfers discussed.
Anyone else? Okay. Winter update on district strategic plan and board goals. Dr. Atley and Dr. Petty.
So this is our trimester sort of review of where we are with board goals and the strategic plan. We did come to an agreement on a sort of formats at the start of the year, so that's been helpful. The green, yellow, and red dots suggest completed, in progress, not started. I won't go over, I won't read every single one of these. You can see what we did with the update in blue was what the fall update was, and the winter update is in sort of pink color, and we've made those additions. So if you want to just go through them in order, Madam Chair, but unless the board has, I'll just talk generally, the metrics, we're underway with that, and we're going to have a wee walk through this evening of what that actually looks like.
Okay.
The metrics for the technologies included, a lot of that's actually included in the communications plan.
Meaning you added technology usage to the communications plan?
Yes, because it'll be tracked separately, but it's also tracked in the communications plan.
Okay. Any questions on goal 1, Robin? Goal 2?
Goal 2, we said that the evidence of teaching and learning topics included in curriculum agendas, they'll be ongoing, but that's basically the basically being planned out, so that's relatively completed. And the work on literacy and so on and so forth, play-based learning. Teacher learning opportunities, we started the Aspiring Leadership Academy that was very well attended for staff pre-K through 12, and interested in bringing kindergarten teachers and AP calculus teachers together. But that's been very well received.
Questions on goal 2, Robin?
So, and understandably, there's a big focus on the K through 3 literacy in terms of the alignment of curriculum, et cetera, to kind of make sure we're taking steps. And I guess the question I have is for grades 4 through 12, for instance, in the ELA area, it would be really helpful to also see action plans or items that are being addressed to help students, particularly in the later grades of elementary school, middle school, and also the early high school students who were in middle school during COVID, and what we're doing within our existing ELA curriculum to address those learning needs. And I'm not talking about the kind of special education or SRBI, MTSS group. I'm talking about general education students in particular, and I don't know if this would reside more in a curriculum committee ongoing update format potentially, because we hear about new curriculum items, but we don't really talk about as much. What are we doing within existing curriculum in areas where we've identified a need, which kind of gets to looking at data, making revisions based on data, and that's kind of where I'm going with that.
If I can, thank you for pointing that out, Robin. So the urgency is certainly around the K-3 piece because we need to be thinking about foundational literacy, teaching and learning, as pointed out by the state, in some areas of our work that we know we want to seek improvement in. And we've talked about those throughout. I'm really proud of the fact that we've engaged our district in a pre-K through 12 steering committee. So that was not something that was required by the state, but definitely a need that I felt we had, and so did our administrators and teachers in the district. So exactly what you're pointing out, any shifts we make in K-3, we need to be relatively thinking about what is the alignment preschool through grade 12. We certainly know our preschool kiddos have pre-literacy skills, so they should be included in that group. And we want the articulation to follow up all the way through grade 12. Kristen Colonies, we have a core review literacy team meeting tomorrow, actually. And Kristen Colonies, who is our 6-12 department chair, she'll be participating in that. And so I anticipate that the next focus area of our work will be to think about some of the shifts that we're making K-3 and how does that impact the 6-12 experience, and also the students that are currently in those upper grades who may have not had some of the same opportunities that our students will have now that we're making some of these adjustments. What will we do with that cohort, if that makes sense?
And just in terms of ongoing curriculum committee updates, because I know we talk about we're in, stage 1 of a curriculum revision process. Now we're in stage 2, but how can we make that a little more tangible for board members that might have specific questions within specific discipline areas?
I'm really looking forward to the opportunity when we have this part of our work settled, K-3 literacy, because there is so much more to talk about. So that is certainly will be standing item on curriculum committee where we can look at other content areas and other grade levels to talk about gaps in the work, improvements that we've seen, and next steps, next level of work. Okay, so you can anticipate that will be coming.
Thank you.
All right, goal 3. Any questions? Not much to highlight here.
Now, we followed the budget process, on the calendar as we have described.
Goal 4?
I think everybody kind of understands it. Getting off to a good start this year was really helpful. That's an exciting thing for our community with the new resources. It's easy to say, it's easy to overlook, and yet it's physically so big. How could you overlook it? But it's something that's going extremely well.
Questions about goal 4? Goal 5?
I just made an announcement about the February 27th.
I just wanted to point out that I very much appreciated the participation of staff at our curriculum committee meetings, and I think that that's been really helpful. And hearing straight from boots on the ground has been excellent. So hopefully we can continue that. So thank you to you both for doing that.
We will plan on that for sure.
Joanna?
Yes, so you have listed in here the final NEASC report. Have we actually gotten that?
We've I think just received, or just last week received the report from the draft report was sent to, you can't release a draft report. So we'll have a report out to the board.
Okay, so it's on its way.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Amy will, if the board's okay with those, we'll move through the strategic plan with teaching and learning.
Okay. So I'll give a high level overview. Goal area 1 is enhancing teaching and learning. Dr. Adley already referred to the progress updates, the color coded bullets. As far as teaching and learning, some of the work that we're very proud of is the implementation of our state approved, CSDE state approved evaluation plan for teachers and administrators. With regard to play-based learning, we've had a group of very committed pre-K and K teachers. Actually, I met with them again this morning at 8 o'clock, who've really come in several times a month, sometimes a couple of times a week, to talk about play-based learning, to engage in curriculum writing work, and to design professional learning. And we have come up with a shared understanding of play-based learning, and we're really excited to come before the board on March 5th. That will be a curriculum committee item. And so, Robin, you'll actually be able to see it, as will everybody. We'll be able to see some play-based units that were developed for pre-K and K that are play-based in nature. So that's a very exciting update.
You bring the toys?
We will actually, there just might be an appearance of Legos at some point. We have just ordered those. So that we're really actually looking forward to not only having teachers before the board, but also engaging the board with kind of how to make curriculum more tangible, how to make the learning experiences that our kids are having in classrooms more tangible, and also probably involving children at some point. I think that there is a lot of power in that as well. Having the board see what our kids can do firsthand. As far as the ongoing communication to the board, we're trying to keep current with curriculum topics that the board would be especially interested in. And also we had recently the transition night, and I attended that for the students that are coming from 5th grade to 6th grade. And the department chairs really shared powerful kind of introductions to how the course and study would change for our kids as they move from elementary school to middle school. The elementary progress reports, the committee actually met again this afternoon, and they'll be forthcoming soon to the curriculum committee level and board level, what the proposed draft is of that work. And remember, part of the bargaining unit agreement was to have DEA membership help lead that work, and that has been happening. We have held mid-year conferences to discuss educators' goals in alignment with our teaching and learning principles. And again, the work with the literacy pilot has been really time consuming, but I feel that it's really valuable work because we've engaged in more than a year now of discussion on best practice in the area of literacy and really involved a teacher voice in that work. And I think it's been really powerful that the board has heard from teachers, as Sarah mentioned, each step along the way. And we'll plan on having our teachers continue to be forward with administration as we come to an eventual recommendation to the superintendent. Another update that we wanted to provide is our district MTSS plan. We have a district-wide MTSS committee that is helping to determine protocols for use in district. Remember that that is a general education framework. That is not a special education framework. It's a general education framework. And we'll look forward to bringing that to the board so that the board can see very concretely the continuum of the general classroom, tier 1 core instruction, intervention, all the way through the continuum of special education and support services. And that's something that Shirley and I will continue to work on together. I will not exhaust you with the updates on curriculum development, but I know we often talk about percents. And so there is a linked document there that you should have been able to access on your own. And I think Mrs. Philpott may actually have it to pull up. The point of this is where you'll see the update is previously, even in this fall, we didn't have curriculum overviews. And I'm sorry that the font is small, but there's a lot of information there. We didn't have curriculum overviews, for example, for the elementary level in the area of mathematics. They weren't in existence. So the first blue tab is the actual curriculum overview. That's a high level description of a course or a subject area and a grade level. High level so that parents who go on to EduPlanet can see big picture what kids are learning. And then stage 1, if you recall, is the big picture of the unit, alignment to the standards, alignment to vision of the graduate, and really desired outcomes for student learning. And so you'll be able to see that the percentages are changing on that. And I can certainly provide, I think, more information as we come forward, as Robin indicated, at curriculum committee meetings with individual department chairs to talk about that work at stages 1, 2, and 3. But we've made pretty significant improvements. And, typically most of the curriculum work in district happens in the summer. And I would say that with regard to our curriculum projects this year, we have about 40% of the projects completed that we budgeted for. And I think that it's better for us to be doing it that way because then we can progress monitor the quality of the curriculum and provide feedback as it's being developed. That's really important instead of cramming it in as many districts do in the month of June. That needs to be progress monitored along the way. So those are kind of the highlights there. And you can see that we've included some portfolio options for vision of the graduate, just some examples of that work that's happened in the science department. 1C has to do with job embedded professional learning. PDEC is still working on, the primary focus of PDEC was implementing our new plan, and we have a lot of work to do in the area still of acquiring feedback from professional learning and needs assessment of what our staff is really interested in, what they feel like they need to focus on to grow their capacity. So that's work that still needs to take place. The last thing I would say about this goal area is instructional rounds have been completed. Most schools have completed instructional rounds, at least 2 sets of them, and they're entirely teacher directed and teacher driven. So that is goal 1. I think I saw a question. Joanna.
So I have a question about 1B and a question about 1C. I'm not sure if I've missed this in all the discussion about EduPlanet, but what is available for parents right now and what is going to be available and when will that be?
So if you go to, I think we had an earlier presentation regarding EduPlanet and the requested expansion. If you go to our district website, the teaching and learning tab, you can go to departments and you can see curriculum blueprint. The curriculum blueprint is EduPlanet. And if you go there, you can see by department, each of the departments, each grade level. And what we're doing is as we revise curriculum and write curriculum, we're populating it there. So for example, there was not established health curriculum that was viewable for parents at the high school level. And I worked with one of our administrators this past couple of weeks to align the healthy and balanced living framework with stage 1, course overview in stage 1, because that's an area that we really want to be transparent about and have parents see. So I reviewed those. I went to review the documents personally before they go live. I've helped with that. And those you can see right now. I believe we posted right before break grades 9 and 10. We could have also 11. I'm not sure if that's still something I'm reviewing, but that's an example. So those are there. And if you recall, Joanna, what is really important for parents to be able to see is the course description, which is the broad overview of what kids will experience and what they're expected to know at the, with a grade level, maybe within a subject area, for example, math at the elementary level. And then stage 1 provides more detail with regard to the standards, alignment to vision of the graduate, desired learning outcomes. There's a greater level of detail there for parents. And that's a process, and it's a cyclical process. And we time it out by, when new standards are developed or that new resources are required. We talked about the impetus for change in the curriculum cycle. So you can see quite a bit there, and you should be paying attention to future curriculum committee updates, because as other department chairs come forward, we'll be able to talk really specifically and showcase and highlight those developments as they're happening throughout the year.
And will all 3 stages eventually be public, or
No,
always just stage
so
1?
you would only, districts, not just Darien Public Schools, but districts only publish really stage 1, because stage 2 and 3 have more assessments in them. So those are things that you would want to not have accessible for obvious and maybe not so obvious reasons. But the important point is everything's aligned to the standards. And so it should be very clear to families, what are the standards that we're addressing and what are the desired learning outcomes? That's very public and should be.
I just had a question. You mentioned that the EduPlanet, like when the curriculum's going in, you're tying it back to the vision of the graduate. Just is a lot of time being spent on that by the teachers?
No.
It seems like that's something that wouldn't really exist previously.
Well, the reason why it's important to do that, right, is I just read a great article recently. Maybe it's something I can share with the board through the curriculum committee, around the idea that knowledge is, not static. Things change. Things that you can look up today may change tomorrow, right? And so the skills that we really need to have children develop, and we know this with university and career, the career orientation that kids will have, future job employers are looking for kids to be able to be critical thinkers, to be able to be problem solvers. So we want to make sure that those higher order skills are reflected in the curriculum, and it's not just the content standards. In math, for example, there are content standards that are really concrete about, children will add and subtract within 10 in kindergarten. That's important. That fluency needs to be there because it takes off the cognitive load, right, of more complex problem solving. And kids need to be able to function and think critically about problems and persevere in solving them. So those would be the math practice standards that we would address, and those are reflective of vision of the graduate.
Dave and Robin.
Thanks, Amy. I know we had discussion here years and years ago about publishing syllabus for different courses, things like that. And so when I think of EduPlanet in its different stages, 1, 2, and 3, I can appreciate step 2. We don't really want to publish the teacher's edition, probably not good. But thinking a little bit of what's in between of, say, a university syllabus or, sort of the teacher's edition. I know in a usual syllabus, you'd see things like what the dates are or what the actual reading materials are or the books or the resources that would be used. Do we envision making that available at some point, if you can remind me, for parents to be able to see, or?
So I think that you said that conversation happened years ago. So that that predates me.
Half
right?
the room, yeah.
Okay, so thank you for bringing that up. One thing I would say is EduPlanet should replace a course handbook, like a course catalog. I know I'm in that process right now with my own high schoolers at home. It's course selection time. EduPlanet should replace that, because there should be enough detail in there that parents can work alongside their children to plan a program of studies. So that's one piece. The next piece with regard to the syllabus, that's continued work that we need to do, right? So the department chairs and I will have to work together and ensure that the syllabus and experience that children have, especially with regard to assessment, is consistent within a department, like regardless of the teachers that they have, right? So everybody that's in Algebra 2 should be having the same experience with regard to assessment.
Right.
We always still want our teachers to be able to select resources and to be able to shape their instruction to meet the needs of the children right before them. That kind of responsive instruction is something we know our educators do well and expect them to do.
So I guess if we take that thought of sort of horizontal alignment and flip that to what a parent might be interested in and what you may see in a syllabus versus what we're proposing now. As you know, we've had a lot of questions in this district about what resources or books or materials are being used. Maybe there's a list of 10 books that might be appropriate for a class, and obviously there would be some flexibility by that teacher to maybe choose 7 of them or 6 of them or whatever. But are we going to get to that level of specificity of, like, we're reading, Young Goodman Brown, and we're reading, Catcher in the Rye, and we're reading and like see that, and these are the classes that might be selected for that particular course horizontally. so parents will be able to have visibility into that.
So what I would say is anything that are like core novels, for example, if you give, if you're thinking about English language arts, those are something that parents should naturally be able to ask teachers anyway, and is something that we would want to talk about. With regard to other resources that teachers might pull in based on their own judgment and professional expertise, that kind of autonomy is really important and something that we would want to really celebrate our staff in doing.
No, totally get that. But I think, part of what we're looking for in the EduPlanet is to get sort of a little bit of self-service. So parents can go in and see, and they can actively look in and have an idea of what that is instead of going to the teacher and saying, what's the reading list this week? What are we doing? And again, if teachers want to bring in other resources, and we've had conversations here over the years about how is that evaluated? How is that reviewed? How do we keep that consistent across different teachers and have visibility in that for parents as well? So, maybe this is a work in progress, but it'd be great if we could explore some of that as this rolls out.
Yeah, there is a section actually in stage 1 where resources are named. And so I would expect, again, that core resources are there. But again, a resource that a teacher might pull based on the needs of her particular class might not be included. But
Right.
the core resources are listed there.
And I think highlighting that issue, that's where there have been concerns or consternation where elements are introduced and people aren't aware of those. And, we've seen that come up from time to time. Not that, not to besmirch anybody's judgment, but there have been instances where there's been disagreement between the educator's perspective and that of a parent. And so anything we could do to put that out there and have that be known and take the temperature down, I think would be certainly beneficial.
Yeah. So hopefully it will help having very transparent resources listed in stage 1 that are the core resources, and really having, active ongoing engagement and strong communication between educators and the public, educators and parents is really, I think, critical, and no
Agreed.
software, no platform can resolve that completely. So I think it's probably a little bit of both.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Robin and Brenna.
Just on that note, I think it also would be helpful if a teacher at the open house could actually talk about the books or just the list if it's an English class, because in the past years, they haven't necessarily done that. And they used to do that. And so I think that would also be helpful. I'm more at the middle school or high school level, for instance, but I had a different question related to PDEC. And this is teaching and learning 1A area. You were talking about in the most recent notes about mid-year conferences with department chairs for the teachers. And the question I had was whether department chairs are then giving feedback to the educators on how they and how they are helping achieve growth in student achievement. When does this type of feedback happen to ensure that the teachers are, either looking at data or getting instructional feedback? Is that part of the PDEC mid-year evaluation process? And is that done discipline specific by department chairs? I'm just curious how that works.
Right, so the department chairs do the bulk of goal setting. Feedback is given then, right? Feedback is given at the time where educators are setting goals and kind of planning out what they're going to focus on for the year. There are also observations of practice that are formal observations of practice and reviews of practice. There's formal feedback offered there. The mid-year conference is another opportunity for progress monitoring. Feedback happens there. Feedback happens at the end of your conference. And I would say feedback and less formalized, even coaching, happens throughout the year at various other times, like MTSS meetings, or could be, other professional learning sessions, grade level meetings. So there are formal opportunities and less formal for feedback.
Okay, and then another question about PDEC. In Area 1C, it notes that we're still developing PLC practices to include analysis of student work and data. And the question I have is, wasn't this kind of analysis and work done in the past, and why are we needing to develop it now?
So one of the things I would say is when you implement something in a district, for example, like PLC, right, or our SRBI, or as it used to be called RTI, now we're making a shift to MTSS. In the beginning, sometimes of a systemic change, there's real clarity on what the expectation is and what procedures are. And then over time, then maybe there's a little erosion of that. We talked a little bit about that, right? Like the PLC time has kind of been diluted in some areas, and maybe the teachers are looking to use that time in maybe a different way. We have to, I think, recalibrate what our expectation is for PLC time. How do we define that? What are the outcomes that we're looking for? Because it's one of the biggest drivers of not only growing educator capacity, but student learning outcomes. So over time, you just, when those things are eroded a bit, you have to recalibrate what the expectation is. And be very
Okay.
clear on that. And, we should have consistent protocols that are established and documented. And that's something that PDEC should have some influence over. And that needs to, I think, be clarified.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is I think later in the strategic plan, there's a mention about how the budget, the PLCs didn't get approved, and we're going to have to reprioritize, to bridge what we want to do this year versus next year. And so the reason I was asking about this is because, to your point, it is so important for the teachers to have the time to analyze the student data, think about their instruction strategies. And so I was hoping that, within our existing PLC time that we have, that we would be able to kind of fit that in and possibly shift time that might be spent on some state mandates that might not require as much time, for example, or things that, just to kind of prioritize so that we're really focusing on the student achievement and learning.
So we've especially been focusing on revision to the PLC process at the elementary level. So that is happening regardless of the funding of the additional requested time or not. We know that we do have time available that currently exists for our staff. So these protocols need to be developed anyway.
And then what about at middle school and high school? I think middle school still has it in the team
Right.
structure, right? But what about high school?
So our focus this year is on pre-K. They have it. There's a different staffing availability at the elementary and middle school level that positions us to do that work. And we don't quite have that at the high school level.
I guess my question then is, what will we be doing at the high school level to ensure that we also are having the teachers look at the data? Are the children learning the writing or the different skills they need?
So there isn't a focus area on 9 through 12 specifically for PLC now. PLC functions a little bit differently at the high school. However, there are systems in place where staff uses time together, department time, for example, to look at student work samples and provide interventions for students. And there's the student support center. So there are just different supports there.
Okay, thank you.
Brenda.
Thank you. My apologies. Just circling back to the discussion on required text and core readings. I wouldn't say that I have confidence that Darien High School has a set of core text that every student who comes through the school will read. But in terms of texts for each class for English and history, those are distributed through the syllabi on the first day. And, perhaps that document could be crumpled in the backpack and lost somewhere so that parents can't read it. So maybe teachers could upload that document to this platform, but each text is made abundantly clear what students will be reading. Maybe not when they're reading it, but I think the challenge for opting for a centralized list of texts is that not every class, even at the same level, 300 level, 400 level, reads the same exact set of novels and short stories. So like I said, teachers do publicize that information on day one. The first homework assignment is go home, read the syllabus, have your parents sign it, but that might not be checked as diligently. So I understand the lack of transparency there, but perhaps they could upload it.
Thank you. Any other, Greg?
Just one other quick follow-up on the Educator and stuff. That other, it seemed like a very good update in terms of like where things stand. Is there, I can remind me, is there a set of milestones or dates or deadlines coming up for Educator in terms of like where we're going to get to for each of the different steps along the way?
Well, sure. When the budget is approved, we listed out the specific courses, departments, and actually write down the course level. So that's our mile marker. And so we've accomplished about 40% of that curriculum writing. I'm not sure. It's hard to say a goal in front of the board if I don't know if I'll meet it, but transparency is important. I'd really like to have the staff be at like 60% before April. That's unusual. Most districts do the bulk of the curriculum writing in the month of June. I don't think that's best practice because it's really important for the administrators, myself included, to be able to review the curriculum for quality and to provide feedback as it's being developed and to have final approval. So I'm pleased at the mile markers of where we are now. We've got a bit to do to stay on track. I'm confident that we will stay on track. And you would know what we're working on based on what's published in the budget book. There again, might be some adjustments. I had an adjustment in mathematics today, and the department chair, Ronnie Rodier, reached out to me, and she had very strong rationale for why. She's going to have a shift in who is teaching some of the courses next year due to a staffing, shift. And so she reprioritized a different course and a different area of the course for the curriculum to be written. And so, but that's something that the department chair would seek my approval for. There's a shift.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Joanna.
Just about instructional rounds. Could you, is there a way to understand how much time the teachers are out of the classroom when they're on their rounds? Or is the idea is like rounds in hospitals, right? Like you go and you watch someone
Exactly,
else
yeah.
and you discuss it. So what is the coverage like in those kinds of situations?
So that is exactly it. It's built off of the medical model. And typically there is, the principal would conduct an opening where they would talk about an inquiry or a challenge that the school is having or an area of inquiry that they want to study. After the overview, they would talk about protocols for visiting the classroom. That would take some time. And then each of the classroom visits is very brief, actually. It's about 15 minutes, I believe, typically. And then they'll probably attend 4 classes or so. They'll come back and debrief. All in all, it's probably about, a morning. It's maybe a 2.5-hour experience.
Thank you.
And the return on investment there is really hard to describe. I think if you're not an educator and if you haven't been in a classroom, because a lot of professional learning for educators happens, ironically, outside of the classroom. And what we really need is our educators to be able to see their colleagues in action with students, and then to be able to debrief and talk about decision-making, intentionality, their instructional moves with children, how they're assessing children. We need our educators to be able to see that real time. That's why that's a very important investment, and for it to be teacher-directed.
Thank you all for the questions. Goal 2.
Okay. Goal 2, to speak, I guess, at a higher level here, there's one of the goal areas is around the progress reports. I've already mentioned that. We did issue, as everyone knows, the school climate survey, which is a state mandated, it's an expectation that school districts do that. And now what all of the staff is working on is they've submitted to Dr. Dad what their school climate plans are based on that data. And she's reviewing those, and those plans need to be posted also on the website for public consumption. So those will soon be there. And I know that we have an upcoming report from Dr. Dad, an update for her. So I'm sure that she will weave that as well into her report. So that's that, and the MTSS work that I've already talked about is the big highlight there. Another big highlight is the pre-K through 8 personal device guidelines and the shift to 9/12. And I know that Tim McGuire and Ellen Dunn have continued to work on with that committee. They've broken up into smaller groups now that they're handling things like, how will we engage in educating students and staff about this? What might a plan for a day away look like, or more a week away? What would an implementation plan look like for next year? How do we do kind of a launch for our 12th graders and maybe the second half of 11th graders who are preparing for post-secondary experiences? What should that look like? So the implementation piece is something that they're still delineating. So those are the highlights, I would say, for the main highlights for goal area 2.
Greg.
I've made this comment before, which I think it's worth repeating, is that I think that we need to be very, very careful about drawing conclusions from these surveys that are taken from young kids that may or may not be taking them seriously. And we're taking them as gospel, and I don't think that that's appropriate.
So I would say what I would agree with is any data point, any singular data point should not be taken as gospel. I think probably all of administrators would agree you need to triangulate data before you make any kind of conclusions. So what we do is we look for themes, and you also want to look at data. You want to look at climate in classrooms. You want to look at climate of schools and climate at the district level. So it's just one source of information that we'll use to kind of inform our steps going forward. But thank you for pointing that out.
To what extent are we actually required by the state to implement anything?
It's legislation that we have.
No, right, but
Survey
is it specific in terms of the extent of implementation?
Well, yes, you have to have a plan, and a plan for implementation. And the plan must be posted on the website.
Right, but the extent of that plan, like how extensive does that plan actually have to be? What if the takeaway from the climate survey is everything is great? And then like, once we have this plan, to the point that we've been talking about, what metrics are we looking at to determine whether we've, mission accomplished?
Do you want me to continue to respond to that? So the state largely does not, the state, for example, doesn't provide a template or metrics, just like they haven't for how you approach the K-3 literacy work. So this is not the only area that the state largely leaves this up to local school districts. And so this is something that, again, we're working, I would think, as administration and the board to figure out exactly how we want to use the information that we get and how we want to kind of shape that over time.
We also have, we're conscious of not over assessing the kids for one thing, but also surveying them to death really in terms of like just the higher number. Right now, I'll just be honest, I have a CDC survey that we are required to complete. And I'm doing everything I can not to complete it because A, of what's in it to some degree, and also B, our students have been surveyed on these topics a number of times. So we're conscious of not doing that. That's even pushing back.
Robin, then Dave.
A couple of questions. First of all, when will the Board of Ed get a report on the results of the school climate survey? And will we see the school plan before it is posted on the website? That's my first question.
So I think through the clearinghouse, we had a presentation here prior to, some members might remember that in terms of the actual format of the actual plans and so on. They don't come to the board. First of all, the board wants to see them. Certainly they can see them. But those committees involve staff, parents, teachers, in some cases, students are on those committees. And it's a state mandate to actually come up with the results, have the committee in the first place and come up with a plan. They're certainly available to the board if they want to see them, but there's not an approval of them beforehand.
Well, I guess usually, I think we did have a report from Dr. Dad on the results of the school climate survey. I think it was last September. Would that mean that we would get this year's climate survey update in September, or do we have an update from her, I think, sometime this spring?
We have an update coming up here.
Sometime
In the spring.
in the spring. Okay, and would she also be talking about what the school climate plan would encompass? Because I just think there are board members that are interested in.
Yeah, I'm
knowing
sort of
what that
surprised
is.
that the board's not going to have any purview over this.
That's why I'm
somewhat
asking.
shocking to me.
Certainly the board can look at each school's climate plan. That certainly they can do that.
But there's no approval process with the board to review the plan, and
No,
really?
I would think that would be operational.
they exist just at the school level, Greg.
But isn't that, I mean, effectively a curriculum question? What's happening in the school is curriculum. I don't know how that doesn't come into the board purview.
It's not a curriculum question, but Amy should handle that.
So it is not a curriculum question. Really, there are, questions that would speak to, children having a sense of belonging in the school, the parents understanding what instructional outcomes are in the school. Part of it might speak to curriculum, but it also speaks to safety in the school, the actual physical infrastructure of the school. So it's more broad-based than that.
And it also came out of the legislation. Originally, it came out of the legislation of bullying legislation that accompanied those policies.
It's actually right. That's where it exists within the legislation.
But if the board wants to see what a typical plan looks like for many schools, it's happy to provide that.
And would you just send us the reference to the legislation so we can familiarize
Sure.
ourselves, please? Brenna, and then I think Dave, did you have your hand up? Okay, and then Robin.
I'm just wondering, did the board and school climate survey committee have a chance to examine the administration, like in terms of the if we're going to do it in a different time frame, or if we're going to do it at a different time of the year. Did they get a chance to explore any of those changes possibly?
Brandon, what are you talking about explicitly? Like when it's being administered?
Are you talking about your reference last year that we were giving you some surveys in the middle of APs or something like that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it might just be something worth your
That's-
time, worth considering. If we look at, are we giving this for longer than 30 minutes so people don't feel like they have to rush, and things like, are we giving this not at 8 in the morning on a Tuesday, things like that.
Well, if you have any suggestions, let us know, because we do work with your administration, in your case at the high school, but we work with all administrators as to when's the best time to give this. They're the people who know the best about what's actually going on in classrooms and the school, like the school activities and so on and so forth.
I mean, just like I've seen the survey, like a lot of the questions in the survey are about stuff that doesn't happen in school. So it's just weird to me that we're going to have some plan that's based on a bunch of stuff that happens outside of school that the board is not going to be able to see beforehand and have a view of. Just seems very strange to me.
You're talking about the school climate survey?
So there's two
Thank you.
surveys.
I mean, I've read through all the questions. It's not got it. I had to approve it, which I did not.
I'm just clarifying whether you meant that or the driving use survey. Or both.
Well, there's a survey, right? And we're using the data from the
There's two
survey.
surveys.
So there are two surveys.
Yeah, there's the surveys.
Right.
Right.
I just was clarifying which one you
Yeah,
meant.
yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Dave?
I guess what I was going to ask, we do have the Thriving Youth Survey. We do have the other survey. Alan, I think you mentioned that there's other ones used, and Amy, you said there's no state issued one. There's no standard. Like, do we have a samples, like who's out there? What other versions are out there? And we see what other people maybe in the DERG or statewide use, or is there something that's more common, or is this the common one? I have no idea, but just.
The national one's pretty common, Dave,
Especially in our DERG.
especially in our DERG.
Which is saying we're using.
Just the same reason, and probably a reason for that it's also standardized. What happens if you end up devising your own, then that's open for complete scrutiny and bias and.
Right. And so I guess the follow-up question to that, just kind of going with where this question seems to be going is, so we have the national one that's a standard. Does somebody, I don't know, does Granby have one that's like maybe 5 questions we could borrow and like make this a little more efficient? Or is there somebody who has like a more economized that doesn't focus on things that happen outside of school? And maybe just focus on the building that maybe would be more appropriate we should consider using versus the national. So just a thought on sort of the vendor selection or what other people are using, maybe not just in the DERG, but other towns. I mean, throughout Granby because you've been there, not.
Oh,
particular.
okay. So the nuance of this is originally for many districts, it was attached to teacher evaluation because back in the old system, you had to have surveys, right? So therefore, some of the districts work with some organizations to come up with their own that both covered the teacher evaluation, but also covered these other topics. Since then, there's been a lot of transition away from that because there's been transition away from that for teacher evaluation. And now it's more likely that people are doing the national survey.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just as a general sense, I mean, it's fairly overbroad. It's a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with the climate in the building, which is climate in places we can't control. I'm not sure why we're measuring for that. So if somebody has a more focused or version that really gets down to things that we should be in control of, that might be something we should be using.
I think Robin is up.
I had a question about the progress reports and why they are being revised. What is the need for that?
So one of the things that I try to remind us of is that when we make shifts in curriculum or instruction, we make shifts in assessment, and progress reports are how we communicate out how we're assessing student learning outcomes. And so in some areas, like there are new social studies standards, we have K-3 literacy, right? That's happening right now. So those shifts alone would require a look at the report cards.
It was also the last outstanding issue in the teacher negotiations that we would sit down and do this. So it's one of the last outstanding things to do in that contract.
But are they being revised away from certain ways of measuring students? Or
It's just that the standards are being adjusted.
just the standards that are, oh, okay.
Dave?
Was there a change to any like comments or anything like that being included?
I mean, for middle school?
Yeah.
I am waiting to actually see what the outcome of that committee work has.
Okay.
I think they met actually even
They
today
met
again.
this afternoon, yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't have a final recommendation yet.
Thanks.
This is a corollary to that. I think this is talked about a little later in the strategic plan, but there was also something about how we're evaluating or changing, how we're grading, how we're doing other things along with the progress reports. It's like the grading. Maybe I'll wait for it until we cover
Yeah,
it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Let's just wait till we get there. Okay. Goal area 3.
So this,
Sorry, just Brenda had one more thing to say.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Brenna.
Sorry, just a point of information. Last one.
It's okay.
I just think an important connection for us to make between the value of the school climate survey that might be asking additional information is that we think of school as a collection of individuals coming from all different places, all different living spaces, all different lives and stories. And so I think that the reason why this survey incorporating that additional or unnecessary information, I think is so that we can meet students and we can meet everyone where they're at and we can provide them with the most care that we can, because I think that as officials, it's our responsibility to provide equal care and support for everyone. And I think that's what this survey does.
Thank you.
okay, on to goal area 3. One of the things, again, that I'd like the board to be thinking about is as we're revising curriculum, that's where we should see in stage 1, alignment to the vision of the graduate, and also in how students are being assessed, so that we're, again, asking students to practice those higher order skills beyond just straight content knowledge. So I've shared some examples in the area of science. We've also had continued professional learning and restorative practices as aligned to vision of the graduate competencies. There's legislation for restorative practices. That's something that we are required to do and provide professional learning on annually. One of the things that we're looking forward to is conducting focus groups in the spring of students who are recent graduates who have moved on to life beyond Darien High School and the school district experience, to see how they were prepared and some things that we might want to consider with regard to programming and how we're preparing our young people for their next steps. We're still exploring tech tools that we might use with regard to storing the information for vision of the graduate. Again, I think it would be really neat. My kids are beyond this point now, but if I had little ones and I could see how they were mastering some of those competencies in vision of the graduate along the way from pre-K all the way up to grade 12, that could be something that I think would be really neat for educators and parents to see together. And then I would say, Shirley, if she has any other comments about the options for the transition programming. I know that's something that was discussed in the budget process, and that's the last piece of this goal 3C.
Thanks, Amy. I just said we're going to continue to look at our students and needs for transition programs. Although we can go forward for this year, we're hoping we'll have information to consider for next year in terms of, and we look at students and their needs. We're doing, we mentioned in the last presentation, actually at PD Day yesterday, some of our staff members in the high school did some workshops on transition programs and supporting all students and learners. So it's part of our professional learning that will continue this year and next year.
Thank you. Any questions on this goal 3? No. Okay. Goal 4.
Goal 4, we've referenced the Aspiring Leader Academy. I think we have close to 30 staff members participating in that from the elementary, middle, and high school level and across departments. So that's really great. There are some of the candidates in there that are, I should say, participants that are currently in 092 programs, others that are just curious and wondering what it's like, behind the screen. We've had really great conversation there. Our upcoming session is on supporting educator growth. So we're talking about a lot to do with supervision and evaluation there. And upcoming in the spring, each of these participants will have an opportunity to shadow a district administrator and then reflect on that experience together. And I think in the spring, we will be providing or awarding certificates, and Marge and I are looking forward to, I'm sure, sharing more of a comprehensive review of the successes and opportunities for next level of work with that. We had Ed Camp on Monday, which is a lot of, it's really driven by educators designing PD for their colleagues. And so there were a variety of really neat areas of interest and expertise where our educators at the elementary level planned professional learning sessions for their colleagues. So that's, again, one of our goals, and something that we're focusing on in the strategic plan is to ensure that we have teacher voice in PD and teacher leadership in preparing that. And again, I've already referenced the ongoing work of PDEC. I think we have a meeting next week, Marge, next with our group. We've again conducted observations for all of cohort 1 and implemented observations for cohort 2, which are the cohort 1 is the educators that require more observations of practice based on where they are in their cycle, non-tenured staff. And we've had continued calibration exercises at leadership meetings. I believe next week we also have 2 level meetings for elementary and secondary. That's the focus, really calibrating our lens for instructional practice. I think that is it for this goal. Unless Marge, you had anything to add?
Okay. Any questions on this goal? Okay. Thank you. Goal 5.
Okay. Goal 5, enhancing systems to promote efficiency, coherence, and communication. One of the things that we're looking at is using technology to increase the efficiency of staff. We'll be talking soon, I'm sure, Marge and I with the board about, and we discussed this actually a little bit even during the budget process, more efficient software to be using for educator evaluation in lieu of the TEPL system that we've had now. And so we're looking at, will be a Google option that will be free of cost. Well, not really free, nothing's free. We already have a Google charge, but something that would be no additional cost. And in addition, we are aligning district curriculum to I was thinking now, sorry, analyzing pre-K-12 student progress reports. I've already mentioned that. I'm trying to go quickly. The policy audit is nearly complete. And I know that there are other policies that are being brought back again tonight. I think field trip. I don't know, Marge, if you have anything about policies. Nope. Okay.
And just to highlight on the first bullet that we were looking to operationalize some of the communications work, and that's what you have here is coming in March.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Any questions on this goal, Robin?
So what I was asking previously was in 5B in the action column, it says pre-K through 12 student performance reports, including grades and grade reporting, and analyzing these to align them to district guiding documents. And that's why I was wondering what is changing in terms of grades and grade reporting.
There is nothing changing at this point. That's a 2-year goal. And I think that's something that would require much more discussion. I think that many districts, this was, I think, drafted in the original strategic plan. So what that is getting at is kind of mastery-based learning. And we want to make sure that we're also having standards aligned learning and progress reporting in districts. So that's just not a focus of our work right now. We have traditional grading happening and we're not making any shifts.
Okay.
There are no
thank you.
proposed shifts.
Okay.
Other questions on 5? Okay. Goal area 6.
Goal area 6, improving school facilities. There was the MMS facility study in the FY26 budget. There's some information there about radon results. We've recently had a security update from Mr. Kolakowski. The phasing of HHR is on schedule, and the current budget reflects a facility study only for MMS with DHS, Tokenique, and Central Services being moved out to potentially FY27. Those are the highlights there.
Other questions on 6? Goal 7?
Okay, last but not least, improving technology to support teaching and learning. We've already discussed through the budget process, the use of Learn platform to analyze software utilization in district. ELP and K science-based curricular units are have been developed, 3 units. We're looking forward to sharing those with the board actually on March 5th. Again, with some play opportunity built in. I think that will be something that the board and parents will be really excited to see. Providing professional learning to staff regarding EduPlanet. So we have sessions coming up, I think 4 sessions the first 2 weeks of March for staff to understand how the EduPlanet platform works. And then we also have additional sessions that we've planned for April and May regarding UBD and UDL, so that as our staff continues to become curriculum writers in district, we're keeping them really current in understanding the framework that we use, I should say frameworks for curriculum writing. And so those were very well attended last year. We had like 100 staff members across the district attend. And there was actually a request to offer them again this spring. And it's good practice to offer them again in the spring. We're working on a draft of AI guidance. Actually, this afternoon, I read the most recent guidance that staff worked on, not only in the District Technology Council, a meeting that happened in the last week, but also during the professional learning yesterday. So that will be forthcoming to the board. That's very exciting and transformative work, and work that it's changing as we're doing it, right? And we have identified training for Aspen in the FY26 budget. Actually, there was a prepare to build training that took place this morning that administration took part in for the middle school schedule builds. We are also looking at the infrastructure, including network connections and wireless access, and the data is reported to be successfully being collected there by Mr. Adams. Those are the highlights in the technology goal.
Pleased to see AI guidance. Katie?
Thank you. Amy, I just wanted to ask for clarification on that last part with 7B. It mentions in the infrastructure about hardware. Is that encompassing some of the things that we talked about during the budget season, like desktops and laptops, ViewSonics versus monitors, all of those kind of pieces of the kind of physical devices and hardware? Is that included in this piece?
So I'm going to actually defer a little bit more to Rich because he oversees that department. But there, as far as I know, has been no further discussion other than what was most recently discussed at the board table during the budget process.
Yep, that's correct.
Great. We're on
And
the same page.
these, if you're saying 7B, it's more for inventory purposes.
For the usage reports. Those
Not,
usage is for inventory, not just the equipment inventory.
Yes.
Sorry, the 2 different bullets.
Yes. Yes, but for inventory and also usage of. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
usage is for software, so we do use the Learn platform that analyzes how many users have for a variety of different software programs.
Yeah.
Then the inventory is for, ViewSonics,
Hardware.
monitors, Chromebooks, computers, laptops.
So we're not monitoring usage of hardware, basically.
Right.
Thank you. Is there a way to do that?
For certain products, probably not. It depends on the product that we have. Things like the ViewSonics we know are used often, and there isn't, we talked about this during the budget, there isn't a replacement for a ViewSonic for a monitor. They don't have the same functionality. For certain laptops and Chromebooks, I mean, we do have certain softwares that we can use to see how often they're open, but not necessarily how often they're used. And then Apple products, it's a little more difficult. That's not something that we have the ability to track how often they're used.
Robin?
Just one comment on the ViewSonics. I did note in some documents I was looking at a couple days ago that there was a grant that was made to the district for interactive LED. I believe it might have been the ViewSonic screens a number of years ago. So there might be available options
That
within
was-
the community
That was federal grant dollars that we received.
was it?
Yes,
Okay.
it was ARPA fund grant. So we haven't, there's nothing available at this point that we're aware of that we could use.
I was talking about community organizations that usually give technology-oriented grants.
Yeah, we always reach out to the community. They've been very kind to this point.
Any other questions on that goal? All right, thank you for the time and effort goes into that.
Thank you all.
I will say on the.
It's my board for the conversation. What,
We
go
sort
ahead.
of mentioned it before, but just on the strategic plan, there's one more year of the strategic plan, so in the next year's version, minimally, there should be some reference of
Agreed.
developing, modifying, replacing as we move forward.
Thank you. Okay, data dashboard update.
So the board wanted us to bring this back for discussion. It's been on the master agenda here. We did roll it out in September. So on just a couple of things that are in the memo that we did for the board. One is we're also looking this. It is plausible that under the current goals that we have, that we could develop metrics for each of those things. We give some examples in the memorandum just to give you some examples that it could be done. That's not the purpose of tonight's discussion, but we just put that in as to it was a board discussion at some point, like would there be other things the board approved for this particular year goal area 1 and the metrics for them. There was a wee subcommittee of this board who met to go over and sort of review with administration what that might be. So a couple of things, I'm working backwards probably in UBD design. There's a couple of guiding questions at the end that I really need to bring to closure a little bit. And some of them are very basic. Is there consensus on the use of metrics for strategic goal 1? We left it sort of a wee bit up in the air at the last meeting, so whether we close them out tonight or not, but these are just some questions. Is there agreement to complete and publish the teaching and learning metrics by the end of the year? Do you want us to do that or do you not? Will the dashboard, we can give you our opinion, but will the dashboard be visible to the public? Where should the dashboard be housed? Again, we can share this with you, but is there a desire to expand the use of metrics to the other goal areas? So these are just some, whether they're closed out tonight or whether they're not. Those are just some guiding questions that would be helpful as we sort of move forward. Tonight, I would just mention, Amy's going to walk you through, and in response to Robin's question, we sent just some sort of snapshots to the board. We're going to walk you through, it's a wee bit of proprietary, the actual website design itself, but we're going to just sort of walk you through what it might look like, what it currently looks like. It's relatively ready to be published at this particular point for the goaler at the teaching and learning. And I use this as a sort of like occasionally you got to look at the scoreboard, right? And it's also very public. It's available to the community should the board decide that we want to make it to the community. So Amy's going to sort of just walk you through each one. It's just important tonight that there could be a tendency to start to compare the data. That's not the purpose of tonight's meeting, right? Not to say like why are we at 67 versus whatever. That's not really the focus of tonight. It's really, is this the format and is that what you want it to look like? And do you have questions about it or otherwise? So with that,
Then meaning that if we agree to the format, then going forward, this would accompany our review of goal area 1.
correct.
So that we would be able to actually compare the data.
Oh, yes, yes, but I
but
just
just not
for
tonight.
tonight, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
No, I
format.
understand. I'm just clarifying
Correct, yes,
that the
yes.
purpose of it is to be able to discuss the
Correct,
data in the
yes,
future. Yes.
Before we start, just
Yes.
one question. Would this be on an annual basis that we would get an update? Is it basically a yearly
Yes,
dashboard? Okay.
Yeah.
And the timing, ideally, we can talk about this, but I mean.
well, it
just
depends
what
when it
would
comes
the
out from
timing
the
be?
state and so on and so forth.
Okay.
It would be updated immediately. We have the information.
The only reason I was mentioning that is that it would be helpful if we had the latest update. I don't know if this is possible, but prior to our summer retreat and discussion of like goal setting, strategic planning, et cetera. So, but we should see it first, obviously, yeah.
All right, knock them dead, Amy.
And at any rate, the state data comes out over the summer, but it's embargoed until typically closer to when school opens. So we've actually navigated this website before together, but we've started with the Smarter Balance assessment. So remember, that's assessment that focuses on literacy and numeracy in grades 3 through 8. The first chart that you see is grade 3 students meeting or exceeding goal, and that's all students, every student in grade 3. The chart next to it is the students that are identified as high needs. So those are the students that receive special education services or ML services, or students who might be receiving free or reduced lunch. It's important to note that we have included 3 years, 23 and 24, because they're the most current years, and 2018 and 19, because that is the closest pre-COVID year. And if you go over Mrs. Philpott to the right with the arrow, you can just see, again, students that are meeting or exceeding the goal in mathematics. The same thing for students who are identified as high needs. If there isn't a bar there, it's because the data is suppressed, because the population of students in that group, that cohort, is too small. It would be personally identifiable. We can't have growth data for grade 3 because this is the first year of implementation. Students don't take the Smarter Balance assessment in grade 2. So the Smarter Balance assessment, you can see that we focused on grades 3 and 5, 3 because it's an initial first year, 5 because it's a transitional year before children are going into the middle school, and 8 because it's the summative year of that middle school kind of pre-K-8 experience before kids transition to the high school. Mrs. Philpott, if you click on the first chart on where it's grade 3, arrow back to the left. If you click on that, you'll see in the top left corner, just click on the chart. There you go. On the top left corner, it says open glossary. So this is where parents or any stakeholders could see what is the Smarter Balance assessment, what are the overall achievement levels, to kind of help people understand what is a student growth target and what is growth rate, so that parents get this information also when they get their child's individual achievement report from the Smarter Balance assessment. But this is, again, so parents can understand what, or any viewers can understand what that assessment is about.
You just click on that first, please. Thank you. So if you just click on it, just so in the top left-hand corner, please. So there'll be an explanation of what this assessment's about.
Okay, it's hard to read, so that's why I was saying it's overall achievement level, student growth target, and growth rate. Because remember, the Smarter Balance assessment is really assessing to the standards, but also there are individual targets that every child is expected to meet, and that's reported year over year by the state, and parents can view that on their child's individual report. The Next Generation Science Standard, assessment, that assessment is issued not in 3rd grade, it's beginning in grade 5. So that's why you see 5th grade is the first assessment and data set there. Again, the same years, and just like the chart above, we have state and Durgan state average. And then you would see that this assessment is administered in grades 8, 5, 8, and 11. And the same, if you click on the chart, you would see, if you arrow over to the left, you would see the option again for the glossary, where you can have a description of what the Next Generation Science standard assessment is. Okay, SAT, again, it's important to recognize that our students in Darien Public Schools take the SAT a number of times, but what this is reporting out is the state's required SAT school day assessment that students take in the 11th grade. And so again, DIRG scores, state scores, and then going across, you can see students were identified as high needs, average score, and the same thing, there is a glossary definition or description of what this assessment is. Okay, College Board AP. We have identified the number of students that took an AP exam and the number of exams taken by students. Those are important data points because it's really important to open up access for students and be encouraging our students to take AP exams so they have that experience of taking an AP or ECE, a college level rigorous course while they're still with us in the school system. And then the final chart is students who are earning a level 3, 4, or 5 on the exam. And again, you have a description of the assessment. And again, the AP exams are discipline-based. So the assessments vary quite a bit depending upon the department. The Seal of Biliteracy is a fairly new assessment in the state of Connecticut that we're issuing, and we have included the number of students represented and the number of languages represented, which is just another interesting data point. I did see that there's potential legislation that's being considered around a civics seal of biliteracy today, I read. So that's something that I'll certainly be keeping our eye on with Dennis Cabrera, our department chair for social studies. And then the final assessment is the accountability index. And remember, this is what the state reports to school districts. There are 12 indicators that include things such as ELA, achievement, ELA growth over time. That's based on the Smarter Balance assessment. Mathematics, the same, growth over time. We also get, you get more points. It's a points-based system. You get more points for the growth that students who are identified as high needs are demonstrating within their scores and their achievement results. This accountability index also includes information about, for example, the Connecticut Physical Fitness Assessment. It includes access to the arts, on track for graduation, post-secondary readiness. Those are some of the other indicators that would be measured there. And you can see that Darien is the yellow bar. The orange kind of bar is our neighbors, and the blue bar is the state. And so that's the percentage of available points earned. And that's something that I will review with the administrators as we get the feedback. That's something I look at with Mr. Manfredonia when we're looking at the Connecticut Physical Fitness Assessment and how that's being implemented in the district and what our scores are looking like. So that's a very comprehensive measure. Okay. And as Dr. Adley mentioned, there are guiding questions that we've issued in the memorandum for the board and administration to discuss and for the board to consider with regard to moving forward.
Okay, let's start with questions specific to the charts that we see, and then let's move to the guiding questions. Yes, Joanna?
I have like a bigger, okay. I wasn't on the board when we first had this presentation in September, although we rushed it today, and I would say it's very, very similar to the one we just had. And it looks like there's a lot of work that went into this. I just am having trouble understanding how this dashboard helps the board do its own work better. Is there, for instance, these are numbers that are updated once a year and we always get presentations on them, so we know what's going on. What is the goal of having the administration do this work? And maybe even more work if we continue to add to it.
So can you tie, Amy, specifically this work that we just looked at to the evaluation of goal 1?
Well, as I mentioned before, these are separately each, one singular data point. So we wouldn't be drawing, this is kind of what they refer to as satellite data. It's not street data. We wouldn't be drawing huge sweeping conclusions. We should be looking at this data to, though, inform curriculum adjustments. For example, we're talking about adjustments in the literacy curriculum in the area of writing and grammar. So you would use it for something like that. So they're just, again, singular data points. The other thing that I would mention is I think there was some discussion of using this as, and I can't remember which board member said it, if it was maybe John or Dave or Greg, was talking about like a PR measure. So really just trying to make transparent and public what the year over year kind of big picture achievement data of the district looks like. If I recall, that was part of the conversation.
So ultimately, we support it, but ultimately the board wanted and has a goal to do metrics and to come up with metrics for potentially each of these goals. I'm happy to support it as long as it's kept within context, and I think we will keep it within context. But
Dave.
So I had a picture question. So at the bottom, the last one we were showing, we had, or I guess any of them, where it has Darien and then the DERG and then the state. So I don't know, just pick, yeah. So that, perfect. So where I see those numbers and I see that 71 is the state average, but 88, I think it's 88, whatever it is the Darien average. Does that state average everyone except the DERG and except Darien, or is that we're baked into that?
That's us bringing the state average up.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And then just one other follow-up question. In terms of how much work, like, did you code all this?
I'm sorry, did I?
Did you code all this, or like some third-party vendor just makes this for us?
I did not personally code all of this.
Okay.
I would be very impressed if I did.
All right, so is this a ton of work for the admin, or like we have a source that we've contracted with that pumps this out?
So we have someone who works with our, what we call our RTI studio. It's also the same person who does the teacher evaluation platform, which we have sort of discussed transition away from that.
Right.
But currently he does this and would be able to continue to do it. Now, if we let him go, right,
Right.
that's
But I think I also saw when you clicked into this, there's some other screens there that we're not looking at today, but there's other information that's available for management reporting
correct, yes.
to the admin and the staff. So you guys, basically, you guys are doing this anyway for yourselves. It's just a question we choose to put it out.
It's helpful to get it collated, right? So this is helpful both to us and board and members of the community.
And I would say, really what we are doing is, the data that we would see there, that's not the satellite, like the big picture data, more of the street data would be data that we would use to inform the MTSS processes. So for example, as students maybe are struggling with core tier 1 literacy instruction, then we would want to be looking at multiple data points for those students and planning instruction in response to that.
Right. And I don't think anybody's asking for drill down access. And I think everyone's pretty happy having it
Yeah.
aggregated.
Yeah, so this we
Anonymized.
weren't doing anyway, but the other uses that I just described, we were.
So this is just a roll up of that data.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
John.
So just to be clear, this data, I mean, much of it's familiar to the board. It just comes in different pieces and morsels throughout the year. So, you know, to Joanna's question, I think when we first discussed this and created this strategy, I mean, can't tell you how much time I waste trying to figure out where this memo was, where this data point was. And this is going to be a great source document, not only for board members, but for the community and staff members as well. So, and it also fits brilliantly with our board goal and the action steps. So.
Katie. Thank you. So I also went back and watched the discussion and the presentation in September. Amy, what is new?
And when you say what is new, what do you mean?
Like from today, what you guys are presenting us, what has changed? What has been developed? What has evolved from September?
With regard to this data dashboard, I would say there's more information. I think there were some additional data points with regard to the DERG averages that were included. And the glossary definitions are new. And I think those are globally what the changes were.
Thank you. So I think that the glossary thing is nice. That's very helpful for context, especially, you know, with all the acronyms. However, I would encourage all board members to go back and watch and I'm happy to share the timestamps too, to simplify in the link. But the discussion last time had so many more questions about the limitations and about how, you know, this almost flies in the face of modern educational philosophy. Dr. Adley said in that discussion that education today is really moving away from standardized testing. You know, we talked about, Shirley, I had asked about this category of high needs, and it is just lumping everyone together and arbitrarily assigning a label to it. The discussion really identified more limitations than what I think it's providing. And one of the problems with that is that for us to put this out, it's really making it look as if our students are one-dimensional, and that standardized testing is what we care about, and that is how we measure their success. And we talked about this before, you know, that it doesn't include things like Model UN. It doesn't include things like being, you know, president of your class, about, you know, academic, well, not academic, but yes, academic, but also like string performance, all of these other things that, you know, and I went back and I looked at the vision of the graduate too, trying to be like, what are we trying to measure? What are we going at? And I couldn't find a single piece in the vision of the graduate that mentions standardized testing. And yet here we are calling this a dashboard, saying that this is it. And, you know, I mean, I'm taking a performance measurement and management class at NYU right now. And the thing that we talk about all the time is that what gets measured gets managed. And it almost looks like by just putting up these standardized testing scores, that this is how we're managing our students, is to just rate on these scores. So personally, I have a big problem with us only doing this. And it's troubling to me that in 6 months' time, we're now coming back for a second read and we haven't done any of those things that we talked about in terms of, going beyond a snapshot in time, looking at the whole child, soft skills, all of those other things. So I'm curious to hear how other board members feel about this. And, I am concerned about the resources that we put into this in some ways. I think metrics are helpful and it really can move us away from some of the really kind of subjective and nebulous conversations that we just had about those lengthy board goals. However, I really think we have to be so careful not to flatten our students into this one dimension.
I think fundamentally, I'm in agreement with a lot of what you're saying, Katie, insofar as I think that we do want to broaden our scope of what we're looking at in terms of how we talk about student achievement, and we certainly want it to be a lot bigger than what this is. What this came from was what we identified as the key performance indicators. They're all listed on that goal area 1. And we did start with standardized tests as a place to begin the conversation. This should absolutely be considered just the beginning, because your point is well taken. So I think, this is it consolidated in one spot, and the work in front of us is to then agree to, moving forward, what are other types we want, other things we want to look at, because what gets measured gets managed. So I think we limited ourselves in the beginning just to provide a fairly discrete scope. We did identify that those KPIs.
And that makes sense to me, except for the fact that 6 months has gone by and all we've added are a glossary and some DER comparisons. So, at that pace, like how long are we looking before we can actually roll out what we would consider a robust?
Well, when we go back to our goal areas for the following year, we need to take a much more robust look at what we are calling KPIs, because we only identified these as the KPIs and we were specifically limited. And again, I agree with you that this is merely the starting point. And frankly, the fact that we're seeing the dashboard again really isn't that necessary. It's just board members wanted it back, because there hasn't been we haven't shifted what we want to measure, and there hasn't been a lot of additional work. It's helpful to see, it's helpful to know, it's helpful for us to be having a longer term discussion about what we want to measure. But that is the work in front of us as we move forward and discuss what the KPIs are underneath the different goals and which goals we want to target next.
So maybe I'm missing where the direct link of the KPIs is. Is that in this memo here?
This is the goal area 1 and the KPIs right here.
But I'm sorry, I have the materials, but thank you. So
this is where we defined it.
yeah, okay. So then, like, for example, I guess then I would say that perhaps partially in addition and to all the things that I said, I think that the KPIs might be missing things too. Like, for example, there's nothing in here about grade point average. There's nothing in here about the rigor of our classes and maybe even how they relate to other ones, right? How many students are taking honors classes? There was something that said the number of AP exams that students sat for, but we didn't even talk about how they scored on them, right? Or how many students might be taking 5 in 1 year. Like, that's an important measure as well, right? So I guess I would just say that I think with the incredible amount of work that both our staff and our students do, I don't think that this, scratches the surface.
I think we're all in agreement on that. It doesn't, this was merely meant to begin the conversation. It has to continue from here. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I would just add, I think that this was intended on being the starting point. So this was like, we need a framework that the board can look at using the least amount of resources as possible to get that framework in place. So these are like very readily available information that the administration already has. So it was like, all right, let's see if we actually like what it looks like and see if the product is something that we actually think is important. There's a totally separate conversation that you're talking about, which I think I had actually circulated to the whole board, a list of potential KPIs, soliciting feedback from the board to say, what am I missing? I'm not the expert in this, but let's get everybody's input into this things like what you're talking about, I mean, participation in theater, participation in sports, turnover for teachers, there's all different metrics that we can think about that we as a board, I would think, would care about to be measuring how the district is doing. And then as we're monitoring those, it's not just about test taking, it's about like, what do we actually care about and we're paying attention to, that we can identify, oh, wait, something's going wrong here. Let's now, hone in on that and focus.
So I guess my question then is, when does that work happen? Because, right now we've been 6 months have gone by and we're at the same place, right? And how do we make that plan?
It happens as we develop the next iteration of it. It's okay. Hold on. It happens. So when we go back
You're being
to,
so rude every meeting to everyone.
okay.
No,
Okay.
it needs to be managed, Jill. My point
So
is,
do you then. So stop it. Okay? Stop it.
my point is,
Goal
there's no
area
plan.
one.
There's no plan though.
Because Katie, you're not understanding the plan. We defined the plan. It's goal area one. We set up the KPIs. When we return to this goal next year, we want to expand the KPIs. We might go into other goals and add additional KPIs.
So it's going to take us 10 years before we.
No, it is not. What Greg just said, we created a framework. We now have a dashboard, and then we go into next year and we start to build this out. And so everyone is having a lot of patience right now, and we need to continue to have it. I'm going to take a breath. It's not going to take us 10 years. We just needed to get it started. So I think the goal of this here is tonight, are we interested in a framework that involves data that is relatively public? I would say yes. This is a great starting point. We move on from here. Yes, Robin.
I agree with a lot of the points you're making, Katie. And I think what I had always thought was going to happen, and the reason it didn't happen in the past 6 months was because the board decided that we still needed to discuss this one piece further. And we did not ask the administration to expand it to all other goals of the strategic plan and come up with metrics at that point in time. Otherwise, we could have looked at that expanded version today. But I think that they've already put together a lot of work, even in the memo, about suggested KPIs for the rest of the goals. And what I would highlight is the goal 3 metrics about showing a balanced definition of student success, which is really the vision of the graduate, and how we can also highlight other aspects of our students and what they are achieving, whether that's music or arts highlights or athletic or clubs and STEM participation and citizenship and service aspects that all are part of vision of the graduate competencies, which could include students that are attending military academies, ROTC, percentage of college attendance. There are many different metrics that we can use to expand a bigger picture of student achievement, which also goes hand in hand with what we as a Board of Education are trying to evaluate ourselves on in terms of effectiveness in showing growth in student achievement. And so I personally think that having something like this in a central location, which would have that kind of basically a database or highlights of all of those different things that coordinates specifically with our strategic plan goals, is an effective way to at least show a snapshot and trends in comparison to the DERG, if we have it, over time, to make sure that we are actually doing what we're trying to do and meeting our strategic goals. And we have work to do, obviously, because it's not a test score and that's not a full version of what our students are. So, and I don't think this will take 10 years. I've done exercises before like this and it took a year. And it's very doable. It just comes down to what you agree on are the most important metrics. And we want to make it manageable. But most of this is already being generated anyway for our Board of Ed meetings by in much more levels of detail. So
That's sort of my next question is, this is low hanging fruit. And that's why
Yes.
you pick these KPIs. Everything else seems a lot more involved. How many more man hours does that take? Are you getting, the counselors in the counseling office inputting data? Formative assessments are done and the teachers keep them like in their own books in their room, right? To see that it's not really formalized, or is it put in a big database somewhere that they can just scrub? So how much more time and effort of staff does it take? to expand this outwards?
It depends on what we decide we want to do. So that would be a question for the board to determine, working with staff, what we want the KPIs to be, how manageable are they, how achievable are they, what kind of effort would it take to get there? And that's a conversation we'll need to have as we go into developing the next year, setting the right parameters.
And so then the other part of this is that after this discussion, we're not really doing any work on it until we go back to the board goals for the next school year.
Unless we decide, I mean, I think probably it makes sense pretty quickly for people to start looking at KPIs in preparation for writing the next strategic plan. I don't think we want to put the plan in front of us and then say, oh, wait, what do we want the KPIs to be? So, but we need to figure out, really, that should come from administration first. I think John and then Dave.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty simple. I'm answering your question, Katie. I do want to see this. These are data points we get throughout the year, participation rates in sports and the arts, and, and to put it in one spot and be able to then dissect and get into the underlying data, I think is hugely valuable to not only us, but also the community.
And I see you, Sarah. I think I said Dave and then Sarah.
I just want to say I like this.
Okay, Sarah.
I don't necessarily have a problem with the general idea. I do feel like I want to be very cognizant of our staff's time. I also want to be sure that what we are identifying as our KPIs, which I don't like that term with education, but whatever. I think we have to be cognizant also to think about what is helpful to you all and what identifying what data points you think would be helpful to you for you to help growth. It's not the 9 of us coming up with ideas. I would like that conversation to come from you all personally.
So clearly, we would drill down and do drill down beyond this, and like we left out grade 4, right? Because we wanted to do the start of this process and then the ending of the educational experience. I want to make sure that our young people at the end of the table here, and we represent all the kids, that they be valued for more than their academic performance, and that there's a culture and a climate that actually promotes that and they actually feel that. However, the fundamental purpose of education in our country, right? The fundamental purpose is for teaching and learning and for students to learn. This is just one. I would be the first person to go crazy about that's like, it's too much. Okay. Now this is going to, you can go to most districts in our Derg and won't see any of this, right? So you're sort of, this is a new sort of territory a little bit. I don't mind it in this context for this particular goal of teaching and learning. There are other ones that, like you said, Robin, that I think we can and need to capture some other things maybe. And I think we can do that, but so I think from us it's reasonable. This is our response back. We didn't really change, and I think you said this too, because I didn't think we needed to change it until we had this open discussion, and had the time to have this discussion. But I most certainly, in evaluating the performance of the district and our students and our staff, would be recommending we do other stuff.
Okay. Yes, Greg.
That I would just follow up with a few comments. I think number one, like I agree with some of the things Dr. Alley said in terms of like where this is headed, where we want it to be. From a timing perspective, I think that like we definitely don't want the administration to do a ton of work on this. So not just in terms of like putting it together. So if we all come up with KPIs, and the nomenclature can be whatever we want. If we want to call it a teaching and learning dashboard, we can change the nomenclature. I think I came up with that because that's what I use in business. We can do that, but I think that we really need feedback from the administration on those as, hey, this piece of data is going to take us 3 weeks or 4 weeks to come up with. Okay, well, maybe we just cut it from the dashboard, right? I think that's where we can give them feedback. And I think that rather than having them guess of what we think is important, we should provide some of that perspective. And I think I took a first cut at that. So that will also help cut to the chase in terms of not making them spin their wheels. But I do think we do absolutely need their input into this of what they think is important to make sure that we're capturing everything.
Yep.
And I also think it looks great.
Okay, so is there
Thank you.
consensus on the use of metrics for strategic goal 1, that this is based on what we've defined? I think that's a yes. Okay, when you say complete and publish, where do you mean publish? On our website?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, is this actually ready to publish? Does it have updated data?
Yeah, the data is updated. Yes, it's ready, relatively ready to go. Yep.
Okay. Is anybody uncomfortable publishing it?
I disagree with this exercise in general as it stands. So I'm basically a no to all of this.
Okay, thank you. It will be published. Anyone else disagree? No.
Is your question whether the current dashboard will be published or the general concept of the dashboard being published, we agree with?
Well, these guiding questions are specific to the current dashboard.
Alan, if I read this right, the question is, are we going to put a link to this on the Darien Public School district website?
All right. It also may be incorporated actually in goal one, the teaching and learning goal and strategic plan may also be linked there. You can go to it, right? You know, when you hit the, but
So that's the gist of the question. It's going to go somewhere on the DPS website.
Yes.
And that's as we saw it tonight.
So I do think there's a question of whether it should be published like now as it currently stands or after we actually go through the exercise of finalizing with the KP, with the, whatever you want to call them. Sorry.
You mean for all of them, from all the other areas? Or for just?
Well, like I take Katie's point, if we just publish this, does that present the wrong picture versus getting some additional things in here before it's published? I also think that there's going to be additional things that we may not want to have published. So it's not necessarily like everything needs to be published versus not.
Okay. Robin?
I just one question. I mean, do we want this to be a public thing on our website that anyone across the nation could pull up? Because, I'm just saying,
it
private
depends
schools
on
have
what
a
you're measuring.
portal where parents log into a portal to see data that's involving students, and that's the reason I'm asking.
It's public already.
We just put it
Not
out
all
there.
of
Yeah,
it,
we put it
though.
all.
Well, it depends what
The high
identification
needs
is.
data being broken out is one question that I do have, because I don't know if that's generally publicly available. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's all on Ed site?
Yeah, that information is on its site
Okay.
as well. But I think what I hear Sarah saying is that depending upon the KPIs that are determined, some of that information might not be public, right? Because that might be more specific to Darien Public Schools.
Right. I guess my question is, would it in the near term, maybe be more appropriate to have this as something that's generated in the context of a normal annual board meeting? I don't know, until we flesh it out more fully, and maybe I'm in the minority here. I don't know. That's just a question.
Dave?
So a slightly different take is I'd kind of like to see this put up there and see how people react to it, see what the reaction is. And I don't want to let perfection be the enemy of the good. And again, I see this as being an iterative process between what are the resources the district has to work on this, what are the data sets available, where do our goals change as we work through our process next year. So this is a starting point. It's not perfect. It's a little snapshot. Let's put it up and see how people react. And we may get feedback from the community that helps inform us and we have a better process going forward.
I think to that point, the word snapshot stuck out to me. Like, I think if it's public, which all this information is public, you can go to Ed site and find it. But I would like there to be some sort of, Darien Public Schools is very, understands that this is a snapshot, that we do not, something to the point of making it one dimensional.
Not
Like
holistic and
right.
Position it the right way.
Yeah.
And it would be received differently than.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like if we
I
just said
agree
like,
with
look at
that.
how great we
Yeah.
are, and this is the
Yeah.
only measure, like,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
But if there's a way to,
But eventually
Calculate
it could be a
Yeah.
tool, right? It can be a tool for, getting teachers to come to the district for other things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of upside benefit that I could see once this thing is fully.
Okay, so it sounds like we're at consensus with publicizing it in some capacity, but with the disclaimer that this is a
disclaimer of some sort. yeah.
partial,
Yeah.
some context. Okay. So it would be visible to the public, housed on the website. Is it a link inside of the strategic plan, or does it have its own?
I would probably consider both actually, just because it's attached to the teaching and learning. So if you're in there, you could just hyperlink it to go right to the website, and you could also have it as a separate link to the website.
Okay. Okay. And then I think we've covered that there is a desire to expand the use of metrics to other goal areas going into next year.
Do you want board members to provide thoughts or ideas on some of those metrics in addition?
No, not now. If you're asking me honestly, right, unless the board wants to timeline this for I think this is enough for goal area 1 to start with, and maybe going to Katie's question, like, I don't, the pace of it might, but it's a spring, we're rolling into the spring, just what we have in front of us, I'm not so sure that.
So next fall is kind of what you're targeting?
Well, we could certainly do work
summer.
over the summer.
Summer, got it, okay.
And I was just talking about list of some metrics for the goals 2 through 7.
Well, listen,
That-
if the
that was
board
what
wants
I-
to send me some with the understanding we can we can collect that information and use that, that's okay.
We did that.
Just so that
Yeah.
you can make a
Can you-
decision about
Can
what
you
would be
please
appropriate.
resend
Resend
me
that.
your email?
I can just,
I'll
I'll just recirculate.
just resend it, I'll send to the board. And then, people are welcome to send direct feedback, and it's just information for you guys to have when you actually craft.
Greg, is that the one for the original one, or is
Yeah.
this for the other areas you're
I
talking
don't
about?
think it's changed since, I mean, there was a,
It was September.
I can't remember, it was a while ago when I sent it, but it was, I had gotten actually
Yes,
feedback from
you
some
listed
board
that, right,
members
yeah,
already, and
remember
so I
talking about it.
put it out there.
Right, so that's that one, but if there's any, if you can expand that into the other areas, some of
Yeah.
those we get spliced into the other areas, but if you look at the other areas now and think that
Okay,
there's data that fits it, that's fine.
all right. Thank you all. Discussion on January 2025 financial report and possible action on proposed budget transfers. Rich.
So this is the financial report through January. We are forecasting a deficit of 47,698, with general education RCs forecasted at a positive 15,331, and the special education RCs forecasted at a deficit of 63,029. As Dr. Adley mentioned, the House and the Senate did vote to approve today, adding $40 million to the fiscal year 25 excess cost budget. However, the governor still needs to support that. Early indications are that he might veto it. However, it was passed with such support, it could be, the veto could be overridden. If that does go through, the reimbursement rate would go from 59.96 to 72.8, which is a swing of $503,000. And so the deficit would go from 47,698 to a surplus of $456,000 if it goes through. Moving forward to salaries, salaries are forecasted at a positive 13,953. We do have slight salary savings of 3,600, some savings in clubs and councils of just over 7,800. Moving to operating, out of district tuition is forecasted at a positive balance of 224,278. Moving forward to fixed, we do have a slight positive balance of 1,377, and that is payroll taxes associated with some turnover and salary savings. Revenue, currently at the 59.96, it would be a deficit of $287,307. And again, if that legislation does pass, that would end up turning into a positive balance. That money would be only for fiscal year 25. There is no allocation for fiscal year 26. The governor's budget does propose an allocation though for fiscal year 27. And then as mentioned earlier, there are no transfers for the month of January.
Any questions on the financial report? Katie?
Thank you. I did watch the finance subcommittee meeting, but I don't believe that this component was discussed, which I wanted to ask about the food service financial statement. So I know you had listed in the line item that there was around like a $28,000 deficit, but that included a transfer of $67,000 and the year is ongoing. So in the financial statement, which I think is page 99 of the packet, first, I want to confirm that the last column should say fiscal year 25 year to date, right?
Yes.
That's our current year. Okay,
Yep.
great. So then my question for you is, can you just, I guess, walk us through the transfer on the operating and then also the impact and plans for the fund balance?
Sure. So as part of the board's fiscal year 25 budget, the board did vote to take any profits from that fund this year as a revenue offset to the board's operating budget. So the first transfer was done in January, as that's when the fund became relatively cash flow positive. That's funding things like lunch monitors at the elementary school and then a roughly $200,000 facilities offset. So the goal for this year is to operate at a zero balance. Typically, you do want to have a fund balance within the food service account in order to fund things like startup costs, equipment if it goes down. If you recall earlier in the year, we did have a freezer go down at Tokenique. You don't have the ability with food service to, wait for an appropriation process to, get a freezer or a refrigerator or whatever those might be. So you do want to have to carry a fund balance. We are at the point where the fund balance has grown to approximately $600,000, which is a good place. And so we're trying to manage having a fund balance in that $500,000 to $600,000 range.
And the reason for the transfer exceeding, like taking essentially into a loss, that number is estimated to net out by the end of the year?
Correct.
Or?
Correct. So we always start the year in the food service account at a deficit. We have to pay the pension costs for the historical employees that have been here, startup costs, food costs. We start to become cash flow positive in January. And then typically March is when we actually have our biggest month because there are no holidays in March. We have full serving days. Typically, you don't have any inclement weather days. And so you'll start to see slow transfers going forward. And the hope is to be in that roughly zero range at the end of the year.
And then for next year, the planned with the profit?
So it's the same thing as fiscal year 25. So the budget for fiscal year 26 calls for that profit to come back to the board's budget.
And that's an annual decision?
Correct.
Robin?
If we did end up with over a $500,000 surplus at the end of the year, is there any opportunity for us to, for example, purchase some technology equipment with that surplus?
So new this year, the state legislature did pass a law that allows Board of Eds to create what's called a non-lapsing account. Before, you could create a non-lapsing account, but you had to have the fiscal authority sign off on it. So in this case, the Board of Finance and the RTM. If the Board of Ed has to essentially have two steps. One is you're going to have to vote sometime in the spring whether or not you want to establish a non-lapsing account. And then when the year-end financials happen, you vote to actually deposit money into that non-lapsing account, whatever that money is, if there is money. The alternative is if you don't want to have a non-lapsing account and you decide, let's say in May or June, that it looks like we're going to have a balance and maybe we want to spend some of it on ViewSonics or laptops or whatever it might be, you could vote to have a transfer, buy those items, and then whatever the balance is, you could still return to the town if you choose not to have a non-lapsing.
And what would the benefit of doing a non-lapsing account?
So the non-lapsing account gives you the benefit of time. So when you do a transfer for the end of the year, you have to have everything obligated by June 30th, right? So you could have some small swings in June, whether it be like electricity or overtime, things like that, that could change the forecast. Having a non-lapsing account can maybe give you a little bit more time to give a little bit more thought in terms of what you want that money to go to. Maybe it is a ViewSonics, maybe it's a reading program, maybe it's PD, whatever the options are. Typically, if you're going to have a non-lapsing account, what you don't want to fund is reoccurring expenses. So typically like personnel, because it's non-lapsing, meaning it's non-recurring funds. It could be special education. You might keep that as a reserve for special education. Maybe you have a swing in out of district tuition, and then you can draw on that account to fund that. But typically you'll want to use that for non-recurring expenses.
But it would not have an
So
expiration.
this is a bigger discussion we should have in the spring. We just could go for a while. Yeah, go, Katie.
So Rich, my understanding was that the fund balance from the food service were earmarked to be used for food service projects. And there's been discussion at facilities in particular about using those monies to transition our other cafeterias in the 6 buildings back to a sustainable model. Is that no longer the case?
So what we talked about in facilities was there would be reoccurring costs associated with moving to sustainable project because we would have to hire, Chartwells would have to hire dishwashers. So right now, Tokenique and Oxbridge have that model, but the other 5 schools do not. So what we talked about in facilities was if the board chose to go in that direction, you would likely have to raise food cost sales that we charge students. And then if you wanted to do that, that revenue generated would then pay for the dishwasher, the employee, not the physical equipment. And the fund balance would be used to purchase the actual equipment, where it's like the dishwasher and the plumbing and the piping and the electrical, et cetera. Some of the schools like Kinley we did talk about are not really designed to have that structure in place. And so at some point, if the board wants to go in that direction, the board's going to have to decide whether or not they want to raise the price of meals.
Right, that all is consistent with my understanding. My question though was, I thought that there was some sort of stipulation about the monies from food service being reinvested back into that.
So you can use the money for anything that's associated with the cafeteria. So what we're using this excess profits for are lunch monitors because they're in the cafeteria, and it's in the facilities budget because it's cleaning of the
So
cafeteria.
that doesn't prevent those monies from potentially being swept into a non-lapsing account, though, to be used for any purpose?
No, so when we move the money from the food service account into the board's budget, we're earmarking it against the expenditure. So
Okay,
what
so
you
it's-
see
it
here
was-
is the payments to the lunch monitors as the expense, and then we've moved essentially the payments, the equal revenue of what the lunch monitors.
No,
have
I
moved.
understand, but it's just
Yep.
that going forward, it would still be the same thing. It would
Oh,
be.
correct. Yeah, so the money would stay in the food service account.
Okay,
whatever
got it.
don't
Thank
move.
you.
Yep.
Just a point of clarification, Robin, you were talking about the general surplus.
Yes, if the ECR $40 million gets approved. That was all I was asking about.
Okay. There are no transfers, so we will move on. Thank you all. This is a second read, further discussion and possible action on proposed revisions to Board of Education policies 5075, recess and play-based learning, 6710, field trips, and 1330, community partnership march.
So I didn't.
I haven't received any
anything.
comments either, yes.
Okay,
Okay.
so there were no questions on the first policy, 5075. But I did rewatch the meeting about the field trip policy. So I'm a little unclear what direction we want to go on that policy.
Yeah, we haven't taken it up or had any further discussions at the subcommittee level, so there's nothing really new to add. So it's a second read. I'm not sure.
Right.
Hopefully, we should have a meeting between now and it comes up again.
Well, this is the second read, though.
Yeah.
You-
Right.
So we had said the gift policy was going back
Yep.
to policy, but that this one,
If we don't have any comments, then I guess it stands as is for action.
Go ahead.
Yes, it does stand for action tonight unless somebody disagrees. Okay. All right. With that, may I have a motion to approve the proposed revisions to board policies, policy 5075, recess and play-based learning, policy 6710, field trips, policy 1330, community partnership as presented? Sarah, seconded by Dave. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Okay. Follow-up action items. So Greg's gonna resend his email from tonight. I think that's the only action item from here. Any questions on this? Okay,
What email?
the one with metrics.
Oh, right.
I'll be able to find it, yeah.
Okay. Public comment.
Good evening. If anybody in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay, may I please have a motion to adjourn? That's Joanna.